Hey up. Looking at something a little more competent this episode, or at least there are some names attached to this that would have me believe that's the case, but who knows? Let's have a look. We're looking at Intruder, also known as Night Crew: The Last Checkout. This is a 1989 low-budget slasher film directed by Scott Spiegel, who's a guy who's had his fingers in a lot of pies throughout the industry. For now though, we'll mention that this is his directorial debut. Before this, he wrote Evil Dead 2, and he later went on to direct Dusk Till Dawn 2 and Hostel 3. The film stars Liz Kern from Night of the Creeps, Renee Estevez and Dan Hicks, and we also get appearances from Sam and Ted Raimi and Bruce Campbell. That's right, the Evil Dead boys have got something to do with this, which could be a pretty decent sign. So I have seen this before, it was a while back, I can't really remember what happens in it, but an 80s slasher film, not had one of those in a little while on this channel, so let's have a look.
Where's my card? No, that's not my card. That's my card. Yeah.
Craig Peterson? Hey, I remember him. One time we got into this fight and I kicked his ass.
Yeah, what?
Here it comes.
Got it. Thanks, Dave.
The plot follows a night crew at a supermarket going about their business, setting up for the next working day. But a crazed killer is stalking the aisles, picking off the team members one by one. Who could it be though? Could it be the crazy ex-boyfriend or one of the cashiers? Or maybe the mysterious unknown person who's been camping out in the attic? But more importantly, can they put a stop to it before the shop opens in the morning? This is very light on plot, and unfortunately for the first 45 minutes, the pacing is way off and it can be really dull. But when it picks up, it does get pretty entertaining.
Bring out all them cases of baked beans and pineapple. I'm gonna make a display of that stuff.
You want to make a display of both baked beans and pineapple?
Yep. And I think I'll call her my Fart Blossom Special.
The acting can be pretty over the top and silly. It ranges from either just sort of passably low budget to over the top and crazy. But a lot of the side characters are basically just caricatures, especially the Raimi brothers and the stoner dude. But you know what, you can really tell they were having fun being these characters in these settings, and every now and then it really does transfer across and you can tell they're having fun and you have fun by extension, I guess. So it kind of works in that way. The gore is the standout thing in this film though. There's plenty of creative kills, practical effects, loads of blood, and it's definitely the standout part. Unfortunately though, it saves it pretty much entirely for the last half an hour of this film, and the 40-45 minutes to get there is a real slog. The main problem with this is that it spends too much time getting into nitty-gritty bits with the characters that doesn't really amount to anything, or just showing us the characters doing mundane activities. We don't really need that, you know? Give us some silly character stuff, a killer and plenty of gore. That's all we need. We don't need 40 minutes of dull, boring setup. It's a shame. Outside of this though, the camera work is pretty impressive. It does some pretty creative and crazy things. The camera's like in a bin maybe, and you see stuff getting thrown in it, or it's inside a telephone and then there's like the telephone dial sort of like overlaying it. There's a lot of creativity in how it's shot. It's good. I really enjoyed it. It's definitely one of the standout moments. It's probably the gore and the camera work that really stands out in this. Music's sort of inoffensive, didn't really recognise that it was there, to be honest. So it's probably I'd probably say it's a well made thing, but a badly put together thing. This film was shot in 2 weeks using what is known as short ends, which is basically just the little undeveloped ends to film reels. It was all shot in an actual supermarket late at night, and you know, it all adds to this sort of DIY charm that it's got. Probably worth talking a bit more about Scott Spiegel as well, as he's definitely been around in Hollywood. So he used to live with the Raimi brothers and the Coen brothers, working with Sam Raimi on a bunch of films, like I said, Evil Dead 2, but he's also, I think he worked on like Spider-Man, Army of Darkness and stuff like that. He then introduced the producer of this film, Lawrence Bender, to Quentin Tarantino, and the two went off to make Reservoir Dogs and carried on working together up until Inglourious Bastards. In a way, weirdly, Scott Spiegel is sort of responsible for Tarantino's film career, like, loosely, but interesting to know. He then went on to form a production company with Eli Roth, which they then sort of released Hostel, and then Spiegel went on to direct Hostel 3. So he's definitely sort of left his mark in the industry in some way. I also want to talk about the Evil Dead boys as well, because they are plastered all over the marketing for this film, and they are barely in it. Sam Raimi is sort of a side character. He's probably got the most screen time of the three, but he's not in it much. Ted Raimi is practically a cameo. He pops up every now and again, but he's not really in it much. And Bruce Campbell is in it for 1 minute right at the end. But as I said, you know, the names are plastered all over, but you know, you've got to sell the film, I guess, and it is a pretty effective way of selling the film. But yeah, it's a shame they weren't in it more, but you know.
That's a bloodbath in there, man. They got bodies all over the place. They're all mutilated.
He did it!
Okay, let's talk about this print then. It's not too bad, to be honest. It's quite clear, the colouring's nice. Issues are that it is in 4x3, which is a shame, and there are some flickers. It's not major, but there's a few flickers here and there that I noticed. Outside of that though, the sound's fine, and it is very watchable. It's not bad at all, considering some of the other things we've seen here. And on the disc we get chapter select, we get 2 trailers that give away who the killer is, we get production notes with a bunch of typos in them, we get an interview with the director, and we get some filmographies. So, not loads, but more than we get on the standard stuff, I guess. Okay, time for the case though. Let's start with the stupid yellow colour. It's the only one that's this colour, and one of very few that has this sort of block primary colour style, and honestly, it looks awful on the shelf. It's a messy and wordy front as well, making sure to highlight the names that appear in it, and I'm not a fan of how it looks really. It's definitely leaning into the whole Kill Bill aesthetic because of Lawrence Bender. It's a little too much as well, if you ask me, and it kind of missells the film because of it. Outside of that, we get a few issues on the back. They've spelt weird wrong, and they've added an apostrophe here where it isn't needed. Not great. Not had any issues in the text for a while, to be honest. Also, the runtime is out by 6 minutes. This film comes in at just over 23 minutes. Yeah, so a bit of a messy packaging, really. Lastly, this is one of those releases with a catalogue inside. Not had one of those for ages. Overall then, this is probably better described as a bit of a curiosity piece. The gore's pretty good, and the inclusion of the Evil Dead lot it makes it interesting for fans of those guys. But they're not in it too much, and for about 40 minutes it's pretty damn boring. But it does pick up at the end. It's a very mixed bag for sure. It's not a classic, definitely not, but if you're a fan of slasher films and you want to see something that maybe you've not watched before, it might be worth watching in that regard. As for releases, this one's not the worst. The print's okay, but there's not much by way of special features. There are better options out there. There's obviously your Street Collection DVD, which is probably identical to this. There's always one of those. Then there is the US import, which is a director's cut, apparently a lot more gory. So maybe that one's worth it. But then there's also the 88 Films Blu-ray. I actually have one of the alternate releases for once. This is the version that I watched originally. And I remember the print being pretty good, and there's some good special features on here. There's an interesting documentary on it. It's a pretty decent package for stuff, and it's part of the slasher collection, so if you collect those, it might be worth grabbing for that. I've seen that it doesn't really go for much money. It's pretty cheap out and about. I didn't pay for this, I was given it by a friend. But, you know, for probably a cheaper, nicer print, this is probably your best bet. If you want something, if you find this like dirt cheap for £1, maybe this is a good way to go, like a charity shop 50p find or something. But if you don't mind spending the extra cash, maybe the director's cut is just a better version of the film, just in general. So there's a few viable options out there if you are in the market. It's not one to rush to buy though, definitely not. You're not missing out if you don't see this one. So, bit of a mixed bag this episode, far from the worst, but definitely not the best. Next episode, a bit more Millennium trash, anyone? Looks like that's what we're getting, because we are checking out The Wickeds.